Good afternoon. I would like to kindly thank each one of you for joining us live from Masa University, Sarjana Putra. I am Nick Mazlin from the Faculty of Health Sciences and Education, Masa University, and I will be moderating today's session. Today's webinar is hosted by the Faculty of Health Sciences and Education, Masa University, and the title of today's webinar is Webinar on Ttrpg for Teaching and Learning in Classroom. Dear viewers, before we could proceed further, I would like to inform that Faculty of Health Sciences and Education, Masa University, will be organizing a physical conference this upcoming October 2022. Masa International Conference on Education by Faculty of Health Sciences and Education, Masa University, will be held physically in October. The objectives of the conferences is moving education forward during this fourth industrial revolution is to bring all academicians, researchers, educationists, and practitioners, especially in fields of early childhood education, English, and other related disciplines to share their latest research on the advancements and developments in the relevant fields. And yes, the abstract submissions deadline is on the 31st of September, but you can still register as a listener before 10 of October 2022. For further detail and update, please feel free to visit our MASA website and our faculty Facebook page to know more about this conference. Meanwhile, if you have any further inquiries, please contact us through email mi-edas@masa.edu.my or simply leave a comment and we will get back to you as soon as possible. Your questions concerning these webinar sessions can be listed in the chat box for discussions during the Q&A session. And viewers, an e-certificate will be provided for this webinar, and to be eligible for this e-certificate, please fill in the survey form. And the link to the survey form will be provided at the end of this seminar and can be found in our comments section. So now, let me introduce you to the title of this webinar for our webinar today. Ttrpg, which also known for Tabletop Role-Playing Game, carries the meaning of a pen and paper role-playing game. It is a form of role-playing game, which is also known as RPG, in which the participants describe their characters' actions through speech. Participants determine the actions of their characters based on their characterizations, and the actions succeed or fail according to a set formal system of rules and guidelines. Within the rules, players have the freedom to improvise so that their choices shape the direction and the outcome of the game. Adapting such tool in our teaching and learning session, especially in language learning setting, would be very beneficial for both educators and learners. First of all, no doubt that the learners can improve their vocabulary, sentence structure skill, increase their confidence to use the language, and many more. And for the educator, the learning environment would be very conducive and lively, and not to mention that both educators and learners will have an unforgettable memory and fun experience in learning language. So this webinar will focus on the benefits of conducting such method in classroom, as well as the basic rules on the game and the roles of educators in TTRPG. So now, let me introduce you to our distinguished speaker, Mr. Khairul Hisham. Mr. Khairul Hisham completed his Bachelor of English Studies with honours in the year of 2015. Mr. Hisham is an English language teacher in UNIMAP since 2016 and has been a translator for the same alma mater since 2014. In addition, Mr. Hisham has a long line experience as an illustrator since 2003 to 2014 in variety publications and companies. Without further ado, let's welcome our distinguished speaker, Mr. Khairul Hisham. Good afternoon, Mr. Hisham, and welcome to Masa University webinar.
Thank you very much, Ms. Mazlin. Thank you, everybody, for the invitation to be a speaker in today's webinar. Like what Ms. Mazlin said, without further ado, let's go on to the presentation, and I can take it from there. Okay. Okay, tabletop role-playing games for teaching and learning English. So I've been an English teacher at Unimap for 6 years plus, 6 7 years. And whenever I have the time, it's not part of the syllabus, but whenever I have the time with the students, I run tabletop role-playing games with them. To see how I can use it, and also to see in front of my eyes, see that by running these games I can help improve the students' English language skills. I have also been playing tabletop role-playing games since 1989, so I've been playing for more than 30 years with different games throughout the years with different groups of people. So I have noticed that with the people who I played, especially the ones who are not native English speakers, they pick up English language very fast, and even to this day, they are very good English speakers because they train over the years by playing. So this is something that's not been really explored in anywhere in the world, except for very small pockets of researchers who are also role-playing gamers. I know a few there in America, and also I know somebody who is trying to teach role-playing games to use role-playing games to teach French in France. But I'm hoping that my efforts, the fruits of my labor will be at the end of whatever I'm doing right now. I would be able to create a system whereby people can use tabletop role-playing games to teach English to English language learners. Okay, so let's just go through the slides, and I will try to show you first I will explain to you what tabletop role-playing games are, and how it's played, and then what benefit it has in education. All right, so let's go through it. So games and gamification. So we've always heard this gamification, right? Uh, it's the drive to use gamification to improve how we teach in all levels of education in our country right now. Let's look at the gamification, this gamification that, when they say, hey, role-playing games is gamification, where is running tabletop RPGs gamifications? It's actually not, because gamification is using, like giving points, and then you have a leaderboard, and you have a game sort of atmosphere and elements within your syllabus. You still teach the same syllabus. You don't really run a game, but you have parts of games so that students can gain points, and they will get prizes or rewards in whether it is a physical reward or something that is that is more mental, something you get a prize, an online prize, but that is still, you're still teaching maths, or you're still teaching history, or you're still teaching geography, or whatever it is. So role-playing games, tabletop role-playing games, is more towards you are playing a game and you don't know that you are picking things up. So you don't really teach language using role-playing games. What you do is you turn on something called language acquisition. So language acquisition is how babies and toddlers pick up language. You don't teach language to children, right? If you have a child, you don't really teach it. They pick up because they listen to you and they try. Why do they do this? Why don't students in class do this? We try to teach them. We try to teach students in class language by theory, and then you have to practice it, and then you have to, it becomes something boring to them because you know how theory is like. So if you can lower that boring part of the language learning, you will be able to make people to try things out without being bored or without being embarrassed, without being shy, or without fear of being ridiculed by their friends, because everybody is interested in whatever fun things there is. About what fun things there is, let's just take a look what's going on here. How do you play chess? How can you teach language with chess? What is it about chess that you can talk about? The rules, right? So what do you discuss after a game of chess? I did this. Okay, anybody who's seen Queen's Gambit on Netflix, you know how you can, well, that is a story based out of people playing chess. But what about the game itself? What stories can you make out of the gameplay? This is the queen. Okay, the queen is doing this. This is the knight. The knight is going to move like this. But who is the knight? Why is he doing that? You cannot really make a game out of it. You can tell people that I move this and this happened, but you cannot really make a story out of it. Okay. What about Monopoly? Can you do the same thing with Monopoly? It's a bit better than chess because then you can say, oh, I have this, and this other guy has this. I did this. I bought Jalan Tun Raza or whatever, a property at Jalan Tun Raza, and then he landed on it, and then he has to pay me rent. That becomes a story out of the game. However, it's still not open enough. It's still enclosed, because what if the second guy doesn't want to pay and he just leaves? There are no rules for that, because in Monopoly, when you land there, you have to pay. Right. So what if the guy wants to take out the gun and shoot the landowner? What? How can you do that in Monopoly? But how can we do that in a game so that it becomes that kind of a story, something exciting, something that makes people want to know more about the story that you're playing in the game, not just the game itself, but the story that is emergent from the game that is being played. Okay, so let's go on. How can you run tabletop games to make students learn such things about natural disasters, history of Malacca, venomous animals, cultural issues, all of these things? How can you do that? How can you use a game to teach all these things? The first things first, what are TTRPGs not? Okay, because the first thing when I talk about games in classroom, people will ask me how much to pay for the laptop or the tablet for the students. What sort of what is the minimum specs that you need? I said, no specs needed. It's not a computer game. It's not a computer game. It's not a board game. Okay, you can see it on the right here. It's a Small World, on the left is Pandemic, which we just gone through in real life. It's not a card game, like Magic the Gathering, or this is a Star Wars card game from Fantasy Flight Games. However, although you don't need all that, you can use computers, boards and pieces, and cards depending on the rule set used in role-playing games. But the rule of thumb is that players do not need any of these things to play a session of TTRPG. Okay, so what do you need to play? You don't have all these things. You sit down with the players. What are they? Okay, a tabletop role-playing game is a collaborative storytelling game. So all the players collaborate towards an end. They do not they will not be in competition with each other. Nobody wins and somebody else doesn't lose. Everybody try to achieve the goal or they fail, leading to something else. So this is where the narrative flows. Okay, so where all the players play the roles of player characters. So each player who plays becomes they become player characters in the game, which is controlled by the player within the setting of the game. Okay, so except for one player who is the game master. So the game master, the GM, narrates things that happen in the game, and the players react as their characters within the context of that fictional world. Action occurs in players' minds, minimum in players' minds. So this is why you don't need a board or you don't need a computer or cards or anything. But sometimes we can use it just to make things easier for the players, like show a picture. But we'll come to that. There are more. I will touch more about that later on. The story is built as the game proceeds and becomes better developed. It is in this story that players will be invested in. So when you play, the emergent thing, the things that comes up in the end is the story. You play once, you have one story. You play twice, it's not two stories, but one story is part one and part two, episode one, episode two. You play three times, episode one, episode two, episode three. So the story will continue. And the story should be, in the hands of a good game master, exciting to the players. So it is like watching a good television show or reading a novel. You finish one chapter, you want to go on to the next chapter, you want to go to another chapter, but of course, nobody can immediately play the next one because a single session might take from anywhere between 2 hours to 5 to 6 hours, depending on how you play. So you will have to stop and come back next week. And during this week, the people say, well, it's like in the middle of two TV episodes to be continued. What do you think is going to happen next? This is the thing, the fun bit that makes players want to play more, and they forget that what they're doing and what the game master or what the teacher is doing is actually helping them to acquire language. Also something which we'll talk about in later slides. So what are tabletop RPGs? According to a video which is narrated by Nate Barber, was only released a couple of days ago. The general gist is you have one player who is a storyteller, game master. You have a group of other players. You are the main protagonist of the story, and you all create the story together. The players make decisions, the GM interprets it and says what happens because of those decisions. Occasionally, there is dice involved where you roll to see if you can do a thing. So dice, we'll come to that in a moment. So what do you need to play tabletop role-playing games? The rule book, some friends or classmates, character sheets, dice for randomization, pencil and eraser, because you'll need to take notes, papers, and your imagination. These are the minimum things you need to play. The rule book, here there are three examples here that you can see on the picture. Among other things, the core rule books teach players how to play the game. But it actually teaches the GM how to play the game because the players can actually just jump into the game and start playing. This is where the game itself, how it's structured, is a form of scaffolding where you, even if you do not know any of the rules, when you start playing, the GM will tell you what to do and what dice to roll, and you pick up the rules as you go along. Okay, so it teaches players how to play the game, teaches players how to create characters, because you need to create characters in the world, set the tone and themes of the game. It can be a comedic game, it can be a very serious game. Have at the very least, a primer of the game's setting. So the setting might be something that is people that are not familiar with. They're like Eclipse Phase, one of the book on the lower left there. It's a science fiction game. It's transhuman, post-human science fiction. and it's not well known. The setting is not well known, so you need to read a bit to understand what are the science fiction elements that you will have to deal with when you play with this game. On the other hand, there's things like Star Wars, where people know about Star Wars. You know, they've seen the movies, they've seen the TV shows, they've read the comics, they've read the books. So a lot of people who are Star Wars fans, like me, we play the Star Wars RPG. The setting describes the fictional or non-fictional world to be played in. Non-fictional is because sometimes you can also play historical settings. For example, you can play World War II games. So you are characters in Europe in World War II. What can happen? It's not just about the fighting, but it's about characters. What happens to the characters? So you need to know where you are. You need to have maps. You know, when you go from one village to another village, what do you see? What date it is? You know, in the world, is it winter? In Europe, will there be snow? Is it summer? What sort of equipment, what sort of gear that you have when you are in 1943 in the middle of France during World War II. Okay, so there are dozens of rule books that cater to generic or specific settings. So different games have different rules, how they roll the dice, what benefits you have out of this, what abilities. You know, for example, if you play Star Wars, you can have Jedi with that has Force powers. So if you play in World War II setting, you will not have rules that allow you to be a Jedi in World War II, because that would totally ruin the setting. Unless you all, including the GM, decide that I want to do this, which is very weird, but you can do it, but it's very rare. There are even legally free rule books available online. You can find rule books that are free, and you can play immediately. Character sheets are forms that record the abilities and equipments, also known as stats, of player characters. So the player characters, what they can do, what they have. It tells you how many dice to roll. All this information is recorded on character sheet depending on the game rules used. So the characters available depend on the setting and genre used. For example, in a fantasy game, you might choose a knight or a wizard, but in a science fiction game, the characters available might be a starship pilot or a robot technician. A character skill might also be different for different genres and settings. Okay, so like if you are playing in a Lord of the Rings settings, you will not have a skill that says computer repair, because there's no computer in that setting. Here are some examples of character sheets. So on the left, you have Dungeons and Dragons character sheet. So you might have heard about Dungeons and Dragons. It's the most famous role-playing game. It's available right now. And in the middle, you have Call of Cthulhu, which is the oldest horror role-playing game available. And on the left is Dune, which is based on Frank Herbert's novels, the Dune series novels. And it was made to a movie in 1984, and recently last year, 2021, Dune. You can play in the world of Dune as well. Randomization of outcome. The dice is rolled by the players when a task has to be accomplished by the players, and there is a chance of failure, which might affect the story narrative. If you fail, very rarely you might die. You know, let's say if you fail, you're injured, you fall off a cliff and you're injured, and you have to roll medicine. Somebody has to give you first aid so that you won't die, and the guy fails the roll, you might die. But you might fail without dying. For example, you might try to persuade a guard to let you pass, and the guard says no because you failed your roll, and the story will move to something else. You know, the players will need to adapt. But and a good GM would have notes saying that if the players fail to persuade the guards to let them pass, this will happen. Okay, so those are the things that might happen depending on the genre of the game. Example of tasks includes driving a car, climbing a steep wall, persuading a guard to let you pass, hacking a laptop, casting a protection spell. So all of these things you might fail at it, For example, you are casting a protection spell, somebody is trying to shoot an arrow at you, do it fast, or the arrow hits you, so you have to roll the dice. If you fail, the arrow will hit you. If not, then the arrow will be deflected by the magical spell that you have casted. This gives players the element of excitement during play. So, like watching TV, there is excitement because this car is going over the hole, and it's trying to jump the cliff and try to reach the other side. It's exciting, but we don't have control over it because we are only the audience in a TV show or in a movie. But here, you are part of it. You roll the dice. You try to find as much advantages as you can, so you can roll higher dice number depending on the rules of the game. But when you do it, when you succeed, you can see the entire table go yes, and that is excitement, and that the people will be invested in the story, and they forget that if they're students, they forget that they're learning, which they are learning. So let's go to flavors of role-playing games, right? What tabletop role-playing games books are available? So the biggest one is Dungeons and Dragons, first tabletop RPG created by Gary Gygax and Dave Arneson in 1974. It has published many editions, and D&D is considered the first modern tabletop role-playing game. It's the most popular tabletop role-playing game in the world today. If you look at YouTube, you can see it. If you search for role-playing games on YouTube, you'll be swamped by Dungeons and Dragons material, although there are other games as well. Currently, Dungeons and Dragons is on its 5th edition. A new edition was announced yesterday, 18th August 2022. So this is not just a webinar, it's news by the publisher Wizards of the Coast, to be released in 2024. So recently, the popularity was boosted by TV shows such as Community and Stranger Things, popular actual play YouTube videos, Critical Role. There's a bunch of stuff. You can just check it out on YouTube. And there's an upcoming movie adaptation in 2023 starring Chris Pine entitled Dungeons and Dragons: Honor Among Thieves. So let's take a look at what genres are available. You can play Dungeons and Dragons, Dungeon World, RuneQuest. These are all different books from different publishers. They have different things in them. They have different stories that you can tell with them. But they are all in the fantasy genre. You have magic users, you have warriors, you have rangers, you have wizards and druids and such. Moving on, we also have science fiction genre. We have Cyberpunk Red, Coriolis, Eclipse Phase. All of these are different flavors of science fiction. Horror, we have Cult, Divinity Lost, Call of Cthulhu, which is in 7th edition already now, and All Flesh Must Be Eaten, which is a zombie game. Espionage genre, we have Covert Ops, Delta Green, which I'm playing right now, and Night's Black Agents. There are games that are adapted from film and TV. So if you like certain shows or certain movies, you can actually play characters within that movie. You can create those characters. Like Star Wars, you can create a character in the Star Wars universe, and everybody, they can be a bounty hunter or smuggler or a rebel trooper or a senator, and they get into adventures within the Star Wars universe. There's Firefly and also Star Trek Adventures. These are not the only ones. There are lots of others. Smallville, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Leverage. All of these have their role-playing game adaptations. There are also games that are adapted from novels. For example, the One Ring role-playing game adapts the Lord of the Rings novels. Song of Fire and Ice role-playing game adapts Song of Fire and Ice novels, which you all know as Game of Thrones TV show. And you also have the Expanse, which is based on the James S.A. Corey's series of science fiction novels, The Expanse. Recently, it's finished season 6 and the end series finale on Amazon Prime. They turned it into a TV show as well. that from comics, you have Judge Dredd role-playing game, Marvel Heroic role-playing game. I think they're coming up with a new Marvel role-playing game soon. An Atomic Robo. There's also DC Comics, DC Heroes, and a whole bunch of stuff. Hellboy. There's also a Hellboy role-playing game. Generic and universal. So generic will be games without any settings in them. So you only have rules to do stuff. So if you are interested in, let's say you've seen a recent movie, if you've seen, say, Grey Man on Netflix recently, they just released the new movie by starring Ryan Gosling and Chris Evans, Grey Man. So if you want to create a game with your friends, you play agents in that sort of situation, you can use one of these, and you can adapt the rules in GURPS or Mini-6, which is simpler than GURPS, or Genesis, which has its own special dice, to simulate that show. So these are what generic games can do for you. Okay. So who do you need to play? It's now what you have, what you need to play now. Who do you need to play tabletop role-playing games with? People you play with. A tabletop session normally requires one game master, 2 to 8 players. Although, having said that, there are some games that allow you to play solo. For example, Call of Cthulhu have solo books where you can play by yourself. You write the thing itself, you roll the dice by yourself. You do not need a game master. And the One Ring role-playing game has something called the Strider mode book. Strider, Aragon is called Strider. Strider mode allows you to also play by yourself. So in some tabletop role-playing, okay, let's see. If you become the game master, naturally, if you're the teacher here, you would be the game master. It's also known as the referee or the handler or the game moderator or the game mother. The game mother is the Alien RPG from the Alien movies, game mother, or Dungeon Master for Dungeons and Dragons. The game master's tasks are to prepare the game sessions, create scenes and obstacles for the players, narrate the scenarios during the game, adjudicate die rolls, play the characters that are not played by players. So there are other characters as well. We have if you have 5 players, the players might meet other people, and those other people are the non-player characters, the NPCs, or sometimes called game master characters. The game masters play them either to give information or to be obstacles for the players. Right? So see how it works in the narrative of the session that you're playing in. The players choose to play a role or character in the game known as player characters. During a game, players should play the role chosen within the context of the game setting. So, like I said, if you are playing in World War II, you don't say I take out my lightsaber and I strike the German tank with my lightsaber, because no lightsabers in World War II. So you react to the scenes and obstacles narrated by the game master. You solve problems arising from the scenario. Cooperate with other players to tell a story, because at the end of the day, at the end of the week, at the end of the year, after you've played a lot of games, you will be talking about these stories. The players will be talking about the stories. They will say, do you remember that time when you did this and such and such? That is the value of the role-playing game. It lowers, not lower, you can say it increases, it boosts the confidence of players to speak and to contribute to the narrative, to contribute to the discussion around the table. Usually, if you're a teacher, you say, what do you think about that? Can anybody want to volunteer? And ask a question, and here's a question. Can somebody answer that? Everybody's like, they're not going to say anything. They're waiting for somebody else to answer. Unless, of course, there's somebody in the class which is somebody who knows everything. So that's the only person who's raising his hand. In this case, if you narrate, if you GM well to them, everybody will want to contribute, will want to declare their action. They cannot keep quiet if they are playing, because if they keep quiet, that means their character is not moving at all. It's just sitting there doing nothing. And if he's sitting there doing nothing, he might be shot. or hit in the head, or be eaten by a bear, depending on what's happening around them. So they have to say, I want to do this, I want to do this, I want to do this. Okay, we'll come to the value of that in a moment. So the benefits of tabletop role-playing games. Speaking skills, talk to the GM. Okay, the players talk to the GM. And other players to play and help co-narrate the game. Ask to clarify details from the GM and other players. So maybe you don't get it. They will be compelled to ask, I don't understand. Can you please, what do you mean? This is what I see. Okay, then the GM will elaborate further. So declare the actions and dice results verbally. Okay, I want to do this. That's another slide which I will go into deeper about declaring actions. But this, it compels the players to think about what words to use to tell the GM that they are performing this action. And the GM will say, okay, you can do that. Then they will roll their dice, see whether they work or not. And of course, it develops public speaking skills. The players will develop public speaking skills because they will need to speak in public. Creativity, thinking skills. So solve problems and mysteries logically. So the GM give problems and mysteries and they will have to solve logically. Predict stories and narratives creatively, plan their action and react to situations well, as players' actions have consequences. So if you are in a contemporary setting and you go and shoot someone, that has consequences. So in a contemporary setting, you're not supposed to break the law, or you will be punished, or you'll be hunted by the police. So those are the things that you have to think about. So you have to be clever to solve puzzles and mysteries and problems that arise when they're playing. Also, by playing a specific setting, whether fictional or real, okay, this is interesting. A player is encouraged to read about it. So, if you are playing a Lakshmana in the 15th century Malacca, what are you able to do? What clothes or weapons are you able to purchase? What money do you use? What do you can you ride a horse? What sort of boats are there? What sort of water vehicles are there? Then you think about this. Can I ride a speedboat? No. What you look? Sampan, Rahu, Lancang, Jong. Those are the things that exist in 15th century Malacca. And then you will try to find out what are these things. And if there's a source book on it, they will read through. They will know more about these things. So the players and GM will have to read and do research to be able to play somewhat in an authentic way. You know that what things exist during that time, in that world, and so forth and so forth. Self-reflection. So players' abilities in the games are quantified by their their stats, on their character sheets. They are required to know how good or bad their physical and mental abilities are, and what skills they have, because they need to they need to declare what they want to do. If they're bad at speaking, they're good at fighting, and somebody else is good at speaking, they will say, why don't you do it? Because they know how good they are and what they're good at. So, hey, I think I'm the best among us to climb this wall. I'm going to do it. I'll bring the rope, and then I'll let it down, and I'll pull you guys up. And then they do it, and they roll their dice. So they will have to understand what's the difference between dexterity and strength. People usually say, I'm strong. Then if you look at the Delta Green stats here, you have things even like constitution. What's the difference between you have a very good dexterity, you have very good strength, and you have good constitution? If they know all this, it adds to their vocabulary, because they need to know this as they play. Mental. What's the difference between knowledge and wit? You might be good, you might be knowledgeable, but you are not good at thinking on your feet. You might not know a lot of things, but you're very good at improvising and thinking and learning new things along the way. So what does being clever means? So once they know that, the difference of that, then they will also be compelled to think about themselves and their own abilities in the same way. The self-reflection. Maybe I can be better at this. Maybe I need to be better at this. How do I do that? It will also improve themselves. Cognitive developments, effective teaching toolkits. There's a lot of tools you can use for language, creative thinking, problem solving. Fun, for Dungeons Dragons juggles numbers, tactics, and ingenuity towards survival. Learning by doing keeps interest and avoids boring tasks. Puts students in position of power and control to nurture them. So students will be in control of themselves. They are thinking about what to do and everything. We just keep quiet. Don't give them anything. Whatever they can do, whatever they want to do, it is the right thing, even if it hurts them, because then they will deal with the consequence of failure. Okay, so RPGs can simulate situations as a form of scaffolding. RPGs are a form of social play, structured, pretend play with peers. RPGs let us experiment from a safe haven, intimacy, identity, sexuality, social hierarchy. You will need more mature players for things like this. RPGs simplify abstract social ideas into tangible mechanics. So some games integrate characters' morals and drives. So if your drive is to do this, you might get higher bonuses in rolling dice, but you need to justify it to the game master. So you need to communicate this to the game master by speaking to it. So you have to think about it. My drive is this, and it will help me to do this task, and you need to tell the game master this. So that is how they can learn to communicate better. So RPGs raise interpersonal and crisis management skills. So possible applications, we're almost at the end already, of role-playing games in teaching and learning. Here on, all players will be referred to as students and GMs as teachers. So here are the photos of several role-playing games I've ran at UNIMAC with my students over the years. I've not run anything this past semester, and very rarely during MCO, because thank you very much, quarantine and COVID-19. So I've ran Mini 6, Age of the Empire, the Star Wars game, and Dungeons and Dragons with my students. So this is an example of one of the classroom activities I did. I played Mini 6. The setting is my own. I customized this contemporary espionage horror. So Dune agents, I call it. I ran it in week 2 for the team natural disaster, and it happened during the Fukushima tsunami, and in 2011, 2012, something at the time. Okay, so the students were supposed to survive, but sadly they did not. So the characters died. So the game ended in a cliffhanger, unfinished. But what happened is, I gave them a homework. Write descriptive essay from the point of view of the students' characters, and the descriptive essay is structured. I ask questions, and they have to answer the questions, and it becomes an essay. So those who did not play also had to pay attention and write from their chosen PC's point of view. Okay, I'll come back to this in a moment. We talk about if you have too many students, what do we do? Descriptive essay homework question was divided into sections to teach about essay structure. Additionally, the following week, their own texts were displayed and mistakes in grammar, vocabulary, spelling were discussed. So this is the form on Google Classroom, on Google Forms, on how I got the students to write their post-game report. So describe your character, how did the adventure begin, why were you there, what happened in the middle of the adventure. Please use this video to the tsunami to describe in your text. Describe what describe what happened during the climax of the story. What did you do? What did you see? Describe your experiences, how you felt. Okay, so this only happened for one session, so I did not get the opportunity to see whether the students improved in terms of speaking and writing for this game. So the other tools that we have to improve reading skills among students when they play this game is game props, written game props. Props are items for students to handle in-game. Give it to them, they can see it, they can read it. For example, newspaper clippings, handwritten notes, short letter, a page from a book, computer screen. So the information in the text here should help the players in the game. So it will help them if they read it. It will help them in the game. So you have to plan to use the proper props the right props for the right situation. Listening skills. So students must listen to the teacher for scene narration, for them to be able to act accordingly in the game. Published scenarios and adventures have text prepared for the teacher to read to the players. Okay, so the image on the right. Tavern brawl. Okay, so you read only in the pink square there. You sit around a sturdy wooden table lit by a brightly burning candle and littered with plates cleared of food and half-drained tankards. So all of this we can also scale according to the skill level of our students. If our students in CFR is at A1, A2, we can use simpler words. If they're at C and above, we can use more difficult, higher, more complex words with them. And students must also listen to each other for them to collaborate effectively with one another. Somebody might be giving out an information that he knows because he rolled the dice in a certain way, and he has to express the information in some way, and others must listen. If they don't listen, they miss something, then there'll be consequences further down the line during the game. Writing skills. Students may be given homework such as journaling to improve their writing skills. Some character sheets require students to write their personal backgrounds or personal quotes or personal drives. These should be made relevant in-game by the teacher. So to the left is an actual student's homework, which she posted on Blogspot. So they created a blog where they wrote what happened, during this only the opening. They actually have like a bunch of other paragraphs that described the adventure that happened to them on that day. Speaking skills. Okay, this is the big one. It can be a scaffolding for students to practice their speaking skills. Okay, so you can see a skill list here. This is from The One Ring, the Lord of the Rings game. The skill categories you have: for strength, you have all athletics, awareness, hunting, song, craft. For heart, you have blah blah blah. For wits, you have blah blah blah. So anyway, while rule book skills list skills as nouns, okay, for example, wits, stealth, right? Stealth is a noun. He's using stealth to do that, right? So the student need to inform the teacher how they want to use the skill by declaring actions using verbs. You cannot say, I want to use enhearten, I want to use stealth, I want to use scan. So you can do that, but it is better we help using scaffolding. We can help prompt the students to, why don't you say, I try to sneak in the shadows so that people don't see me. That is using stealth. I peer into the darkness to see whether there's a threat crawling around the bushes. That is using scan. Okay, so if they say, I want to use scan to do this, tell them to try to describe what is it they're doing. So that will increase their speaking skills. So additional speaking skills exercises when role-playing, and you can ask questions, ask for clarifications, describe people's and things, give opinions and reasons for their opinions. They have to argue and defend their opinions. They have to bargain, they have to persuade, they have to intimidate, they have to deceive. And all of these things, in some role-playing games, it's part of the skill list. So it increases their vocabulary for these skills as well. But then they will know exactly what to do. What's the difference between persuade and intimidate? So I want to ask him to do this. Are you going to persuade him? Are you going to intimidate him? I'm going to persuade him. Okay, tell me how you're going to persuade him. And then the student will have to think. I'm going to do this too. So as per the list above, teachers can also design scenarios and adventures for students to improve their soft skills, the communication skills, the interpersonal skills and such. Teacher requirements. So now you're asking, what about teachers? Teachers going to be a GM. How am I going to be a game master? Okay, teachers should be able to prepare a structured story with an end or a cliffhanger. Cliffhanger is we have to, we continue next week. We should be able to improvise the story on a small scale, in case they are going to do this, they do something else. So we should be able to try to put them back on track by giving them an extra adventure or something. and interpret and narrate the dice outcome. I'm shooting at a guy, I missed, but it says if I miss, I'm going to hit something in the back, and then the teacher will have to decide what happens. So game sessions can be fully prepared by teachers, so the teachers can sit down and write a game session, what she was going to read at first, how is it going to end, what are the things that happen in the middle, who are the people they're going to meet as they are going through the adventure. It can be based on rough notes and improvise. So you can just come up with rough notes. At first this, second this, third this, finally this, or this thing, another thing might happen is this, another thing might happen is this. So you have a very rough notes and you try to improvise as you go along. You make things up as you go along. Or easiest way is you can use published scenarios and adventures. If somebody else has written, everything is there. You can have the stats are there, things for the GM to read is there. So you can also use that. But if you can interact with your students in class in a meaningful way, you should be able to GM a game. So that is the rule of thumb. Other options, other things that you can do is you can allow a student to be a GM. This is later on after everybody's comfortable with role-playing games. You can integrate the contents of weekly scenario with your syllabus, integrate CFR with your delivery and also the student output. What's the level of CFR? What are the verbs in CFR? Analyze. You can analyze this. You can discuss this. You can integrate CFR. Use the content of the game to teach various topics, even math or medicine. You can have a group of doctors during World War II. They have, and it's in the middle of, say, the Japanese occupation of Malaya, and they have their medical skills, and the rules will have to be granularized towards medicine. So different people will have different skills in different fields of medicine, for example, and things happen to them, and they have to try to adapt to things that are happening. Get students to reflect on what their characters did, written or verbal. Use the games to teach theatre arts or acting, which I'm doing actually in my co-curricular class. And if you use a fictional setting, request the students to read the novel or watch the movies the game is based on and discuss it. So these are the things that we can do. Other things. So there's probably a lots of other things that I haven't thought of, because this is a very, very young field using tabletop role-playing games in teaching and learning, especially in languages. So what will fuel the students' language acquisition process? So not language learning, language acquisition, like I said earlier. How do children pick up language? By listening to their parents. Why do they do that? Why do some people acquire language faster and others don't? Fun. If you can lower the affect level, according to Stephen Krashen, students who are trying to acquire language, especially second language, they have difficulty because in class, people will be looking at them. They feel that they're being judged. They feel embarrassed. So it becomes a chore to them. Whatever the teacher gives, they will finish it out, but they don't really pick up the language. So this is why we have a problem in Malaysia. You have students who learn English formally in class from 7 years old until such and such. Even in university, they still have problems speaking in English. It's because they're just learning to pass exams, and after that they forget about it. I believe using tabletop role-playing games, it will make them forget that it is a language, and with the structure of the game, how it is set up, the grammar, the vocabulary, and the way that we can push the students in a certain direction, we can help them, we can guide them. Uh, for example, like using verbs instead of nouns when you declare actions, we will be able to get them to learn in a much more efficient and fun way, and they will remember it because they will be acquiring the language naturally instead of um, no, instead of you have to pass an exam. I'm just learning to pass an exam. So um, that's the end of my presentation. Thank you very much for listening to what I have to say on the matter. Back to you, Puan Mazlin.
Okay, that's a very insightful share on the TTRPG. However, Mr. Hisham, I have a feeling that most education sectors in Malaysia, we are not very well exposed to this kind of game. And the only time where I was actually introduced with such session is that when I'm a big fan of Stranger Things, the Netflix series. So I watched the recent Stranger Things 4, and I can see that they were actually playing Dungeons and Dragons. So that is when it was the first time I know about this game. And I find that when the students play the game, I can have a feeling that they will be havocing, sharing all their sessions. They were fighting verbally, talking about what they should do, what they shouldn't do, what will happen next. So I think that we need more exposure on this, especially in English language learning setting. All right. Okay, so it's very good. Thank you so much, Mr. Hisham, for such an insightful presentations.
Thank
So
you very
for
much.
viewers, if you have any questions for our speakers, please leave a comment on the chat box. And before I can read some of the questions, okay. Oh, yes. So as you can see in the screen from Nathan, okay, so Nathan is asking, do you think TTRPG is suitable for teaching English to students who are beginner learners? So what do you think, Mr. Hisham?
Oh, absolutely. Because you can actually scale it. You can use simpler words. You can you can use simpler themes, less mature. Like themes with children might be rescuing animals, and it also helps them to to develop their I want to do this, the skill or to express. I want to do this. I want to do this right now, and I believe that children make better players because they still don't have the feeling of self-conscious. I don't want to say this. I don't want to play somebody else's a character because then people will think that I'm weird or whatever. But if you play with students, with younger children, and I have played with I actually played with my son when he was 8 years old, and he just whatever he wants to do, he just say, I want to do this, I want to do this, I want to do this. And it's easier to play with them, but we have to think about the themes, the context, the the content, the material, so that it becomes meaningful to younger players.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Hisham, for the explanation. And we also have next question from Azalina Suzianti. She was asking that, may I know if the role play can be one of the effective method in teaching with autism? So what do you think about
I
this?
have I haven't looked into it deeply, but there are people in the United States and Canada who are using tabletop role-playing game to help autistic people. That does exist.
I see. Okay, and we also have the last question. I think it will be the last question from Miss Nosofilina Sari. She was asking, what is the inspiration behind this? So, what is your inspiration when you play this game with your students?
My inspiration is to. I mean, using this, the inspiration to use this in class would be I have fun with it. I develop a lot of skills while I'm playing it. I even one of the skills, okay, I'm technically I am an introverted person. If I go back 30 years and I tell myself 30 years ago that I will be doing this webinar, I think my younger self the brain will explode, because he would not be able to do this. And I believe I'm able to do this now. I'm able to become a teacher because I play this game for the last 30 years. So that is my inspiration. And I noticed that there's not been a lot of research into this in terms of education. So hopefully, this might be the start of something big. And because of that, I hope that this will help my students to be more confident and to be able to speak and write better, not just in English, but I also have ideas to maybe translate it to BM, so we can teach BM students in the same way by running games in Bahasa Malaysia or in any language that you want.
So not just English language, they can actually improve any other language that they would like to learn, and they can use this method to use that. Okay, so all right, thank you, Mr. Sham. So from my side, I have two questions from you. As I recall, you were talking about the benefits of TTRPG for the students, and one of the
Yes.
benefits is on the reading and research skill. And then you were giving an example on you were giving them the setting of 15th century of Malacca. So the player is encouraged to read about it. So when should we ask them to read? Do we need to ask them to read about 15th century Malacca before they play the game, or maybe you gave them homework like a week before you start playing the game with the students?
Um, Usually, when you start to play, whatever the students need to know to act, to do the action, to 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 decide on things to do, it should be in the game itself. So they don't need to read anything offhand. But but later on, we will go into other things. So, for example, let's say if they want to buy a bunch of things, we already, as the GM, we should already have a list of things that they can buy and how much they cost. So they know where they can buy it and whether they can afford it. So once they have that, then they will want to know even more. And that is when you need to actually give them reading material before the next session. If let's say they need to go to the sea in 15th century Malacca, what would they encounter? So if there is a book on that, it's great to give it to them. But presently, all the books we have are academic books. So it would be great if we could create a game source book of 15th century Malacca with pictures, things that we might see with stats. If we meet a hulu balang and we have to fight the hulu balang, what skills would this hulu balang have? If we meet a dayang, what skills would the dayang have? What equipment would she have on her? That, can we ask for your hairpin so that we can use it to unlock something? If it says there, a very ornate hairpin, so the students will know, oh, this dayang has a hairpin. So what do you want to do? The GM will ask, I want to ask the hairpin. Okay, please ask. And then they have to play. They have to role play. Can we have? Excuse me, but I see your hairpin is very nice. Can we have it? No, I'm not going to give you your hairpin. Okay, now you have to think what you have to do. How are you going to communicate so that she gives the hairpin to you. Are you going to deceive? Are you going to lie to her? Are you going to intimidate? Are you going to give her bodily harm? Or are you just going to say that, oh, you're a very nice person, you're very beautiful, And okay, if this is what you're saying, are you sure? Okay, roll your dice for persuasion, and because you persuaded, you use really beautiful words, I'm going to give you an extra dice, a bonus dice. And then they will roll, and then, oh, you're so very nice. And then the Dayang will give them the hairpin with which they will be able to try to unlock the gate or the door or something like that. Those are if we have a book that can help students to play in that era, it'll be great. What about in Penang in the 1700s, or like I said earlier, World War II, Japanese occupation of Malaya? Or those will be interesting. Things that happen to the people there. They can read about the history, and it will compel them to learn even more. What happened during that time? They will look at Wikipedia first, and then they will look at other articles online, and they will learn more about that era. And then they will bring it to the game. They will say, I read that during this time, this thing happened, and the GM didn't know that. If the GM doesn't know that, then the GM will be able to incorporate what the students have learned elsewhere into the game itself. Oh, you said that, right? You told me this, right? Okay. So based on what you told me, this is what's going to happen. And it becomes a collaborative thing. And the player will feel that, I contributed to the story of the game.
I see. Okay. Okay, one last question, Mr. Hisham, for you. So you have been conducting such games with your students for 6 to 7 years now. Am I right?
Well, not very, not all the time. Whenever I have
Okay.
the time only, so it's like very
Every once in a while,
very
right?
once in a while. Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So after you conducted such games with your students, what are their comments or opinions on such game? What are their feelings actually?
Fun.
So they all
Fun.
commented that it was fun and they want to
Yes,
repeat such games again in the future.
yes,
I
yes.
see. Okay. All right. Okay, so I don't think that we have any other questions from the viewers. So for dear viewers, as mentioned in the beginning of this webinar, an e-certificate will be provided, and to be eligible for this, you would need to fill in the survey form that you can found in the link provided in the comment sections, or you can simply see it in our screen now. All right. Okay, so with that, we conclude today's session. So, to our dear speaker, thank you so much. Thank you again for joining us, and we really appreciate for the knowledge sharing. To our keen and attentive viewers, thank you also for joining our webinar. We are looking forward to your comments and participations in our future events hosted by Masa University. For further queries, please contact us through the Masa website or visit our social media. Thank you again and have a pleasant day.